Hello, and welcome to Tonebender's Sound Design Podcast. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Muirhead. Welcome to Tonebenders. This episode is presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. Last fall, MPSE sponsored Tonebenders to go to England and collect a bunch of interviews with members of the sound community based there. This is the third of the 5 episodes in this series. You can look back to episode 308, which is a super fun talk between Johnny Byrne and Paul Davies about how they find the sonic voice for all the projects they work on. In episode 310, I gathered 4 talented British editors for a roundtable on the art of dialogue editing. And today, I have Al Circuit, Ruth Knight, Barnaby Smythe, and Doug Cooper from the sound team on HBO's House of the Dragon. We all got to sit down in the ADR room at Warner Brothers Delane Lee Studios in Soho to talk mostly about Season 2 of the series. Al Circuit is the show's supervising sound editor and SFX re-recording mixer. Ruth Knight works with Al in sound editorial. Doug Cooper is the re-recording mixer handling music and dialogue. And Barnaby Smythe was the Foley artist and Foley supervisor. I'm a big fan of this series, Season 2 in particular, so I was really excited to get some inside info on how the show came together. I want to thank the Motion Picture Sound Editors for sponsoring this trip to London and the series of episodes featuring the interviews I did while there. To learn more about the Motion Picture Sound Editors, you can go to mpse.org. They're doing great work to support and be advocates for sound editors all over the world. Finally, I have some really big news. Tonebenders is actually heading back to London for the second London Sound Design Meetup, also presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. The last one was an absolutely amazing night. So many people came out that the crowd could literally not fit in the bar, so I found a bigger place for this one. If you're going to be in London on Sunday, August 24th, head over to the Crown and Two Chairmen pub in Soho, starting at 7 p.m. The London sound community will be hanging out, sharing stories, and raising our glasses together. Please help spread the word to any friends and colleagues, as I'm hoping it will be another wonderful night in London. I can even sneakily hint that there will be another marquee event in Soho leading up to the meetup that will be extremely interesting for Tonebenders listeners, so you might want to make a day out of it. More details on that to come soon. So mark your calendar, Sunday, August 24th, for the second Tonebenders London Sound Design Meetup, presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. Okay, let's get to the interview. Barnaby Smythe, House of the Dragon's Foley artist, was running a little late, so we started the interview without him. He will arrive about 20 minutes in. So let's get going. Here is my talk with Al Circuit, Ruth Knight, and Doug Cooper from House of the Dragon. To start off, I want to talk about the idea of world building. With House of the Dragon, obviously there was a previous series, Game of Thrones, which was wildly successful. But this series has to both be part of that world and also distinguish itself from that world. It's also got a lot of space in it. Like, everybody talks about the giant dragon scenes and stuff like that. In the series of episodes in season 2, there's, 4 giant dragon sequences. The rest of the series is a lot of people talking in humongous spaces. They're either outdoors or they're in these giant rooms. How you build out those spaces also needs to be treated to fit those rooms. The daunting task of how do you build the world of Westeros. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Maybe I'll start.
Before I started the first season, I was talking to the 2 showrunners who were on the first season. They didn't really say too much about how they wanted it to sound. Their description was, we want the audience from Game of Thrones to feel like they're in the same space.
Okay.
Nothing has changed, that they're still living in the same world. So the vibe of it and the feel of it was to feel the same. And there's very Thrones ways of doing things. They do a lot of J-cuts. End of a scene, 1 or 2 seconds before you start to hear some quite prominent atmospheres coming in, and that pulls you into the next scene. And that was a Dan and David thing, I think. And we did that. And the editors would sometimes do that. When we would get cutting copies, the editors would do that. I went back and listened to Thrones and literally listened, and how they did it and how they used atmospheres and doors and things like that. Then I left it. And I didn't go back at no point, apart from one. I think the lift, me and Ruth had a listen through to the lift at the ice wall. That was something I wanted to go back in and listen again. But I think that was the only thing that I went back and referenced while I was working on either season 1 or season 2. Apart from that, I just kind of watched Thrones and kind of went, okay, they've done it like that. And it's 170 whatever years different. So it was thinking how they'd done it. The birds could be different. I didn't go in and kind of, okay, what bird did they use out in King's Landing and where did they use this? And was more kind of the feel of it. And again, Tim Kimmel and the guys, it was amazing what they'd done. And Paula, obviously, who was with us as well. But those atmospheres, I love world building. I love trying to sell those spaces, whether inside or outside. And again, a lot of the inside stuff comes with Doug and the dialogues and us working together to build those big spaces. And that changed quite a bit from season 1 to season 2. Someone said it was... One of the lovely producers turned around to me and said, this is season 9 Game of Thrones on a season 1 budget. Good luck. And I was like, okay, off we go. I'd not really done episodic TV before. There's a lot of reusing things. You're in the same room. You're in the council chamber, you're in the king's chamber, and the door is the door. And the door doesn't change. So you have 8 or 9 elements to it. With most sound effects, you have 8 versions of the same thing, and they're all slightly different. So each time we go to that door, I could just rotate to the next one. So it was always the same 8, 9, 10 elements, but just rotated in one direction or another. So it always changed a bit. Obviously, if someone bashes through, I do a lot of verb before it goes into the theatre because I was re-recording mixer as well on the effects side. Doug's lead on dialogues and music. So I'd done quite a bit at home already. In my cutting room, I've got an Atmos set up at home. And then it was just me and Doug working together to make sure we felt that everything was sitting in that same space. There was more scope in season 2. Things did feel bigger. I think what's the name?
That's the problem with talking about Game of Thrones is there's so many names of both characters and places, and I have no idea the names of the dragons. There's so many.
Oh, no.
Now, there's 8 dragons or something?
I cannot spell half of the names. Fortunately, I don't have to write them down.
Yeah, exactly.
Dragonstone, I think, was a big leap from season 1 to season 2. We were in that room a lot more, in the painted table room with the painted table. In season 1, it was described as the belly of a whale.
Okay.
So you wanted to feel like it was in there. And we took that, I think, a big leap forward with atmospheres in 2. The showrunner was like, okay, we're on tectonic plates. We're sitting on this live volcano, which is heating the dragons. And so there's crumpling and cracking and there's all this bubbling underneath. But having all this set up a nice atmosphere for this room, it gave us a lot of time to, okay, we're going to go deeper into it. What can we hear? Can we hear the dragons down there? And we tried, and I think we succeeded in making it feel like you were in this, described as the belly of a whale, but sitting on this active volcano.
There was a lot less of that in season 1, wasn't there? Because it's mostly in King's Landing.
Yeah.
The ambience in King's Landing were much more naturalistic about the activity around the city and the things around the rooms that they're talking in. And season 2 were a lot more, when we're at Dragonstone, it's a much more active place.
Just down to the showrunner saying, well, there's no glass. There is no glass in Westeros. It hasn't been invented at this point. So there's no windows. So whenever you're in a room and it looks like windows, lattice work and things like that, there's actually no glass in it. And you see that a few times when they do close up. From a wide, your brain just goes, it's a window. But actually there's not. So you do want to feel that atmosphere coming in. When the doors close, although there's a gap above the door, when the doors close, you don't hear from outside. Mm-hmm. You don't hear people moving around. You don't hear footsteps or whatever is outside. Doors close, you're in the room. So that was quite interesting, but also means that again, I think most sound people realise that they're doing a quiet space and making it feel like it is live and there is something going on. Just an air can actually be harder than building a market scene, because a market scene of crowds and movement and shouts and ducks and geese and whatever. Whereas a quiet room with just a bunch of people talking, there's a lot of
it
in Thrones and in Dragons, can sometimes be a bit tricky. We absolutely got carried away with fires flickering. Okay, we've got big torches on today, so okay, flicker, 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 crackle, crackle. But again, a 5-minute long scene, that can get in the way quite quickly, and someone has to grab RX to go, no, too many crackles, and lose some of those crackles. So
Obviously, most of these scenes weren't shot in giant, humongous castles. We're shooting on stages. Well, how did the dialogue need to be dealt with to make it fit into these spaces that we're seeing in the final product?
I'm adding a fair amount of reverb, but my focus is pretty much always just to try to maintain clarity. Number one, it's making sure everybody's clear about what people are saying. And then it's about enjoying the spaces. There's so much opportunity just in terms of the gaps between lines and the sort of meaningful looks that people are exchanging and all of that, that you get a chance to hear the acoustic for the rooms that these people are talking in. So I would normally build one verb that's for just setting things back a little bit, just to give a radio mic a little bit more, to make it feel a bit less immediate. And then another bigger one, so that particularly when people are pitching up or, a discussion gets heated, something like that you can hear a bit more on a longer tail of what's going on in the room. My approach generally is just to try and enjoy those spaces. And it's just an opportunity where there are those gaps, as I say, that you can have a chance to do that, because often people are just relentlessly talking in a drama. You kind of just want to not focus on all that stuff. You're just telling the story. Whereas with House of the Dragon, I feel like there's a bit more opportunity to enjoy those rooms.
So you've got two separate verb chains set up, one with a shorter decay and one with a longer decay.
There's always heated discussions in the council chamber and sometimes in the throne room as well. And that's where we could really lean into it, when suddenly someone bangs and shouts and everybody goes quiet. That's the moment. And I think the Atmos, mixing in Atmos, is a really great thing. And the new room that Doug's mixing in, that we're mixing in, is a lovely room for that to translate. And we'd both check at home and listen in stereo and put it on a sound bar and put it on headphones and just double check, knowing that everybody's listening in a different environment. But yeah, using those verbs in an Atmos setup, especially for those big rooms, is
yeah. And on the big ones, there's normally an echo going on as well, just to give it like somebody shouts something. You feel the silence a bit better as it echoes off around the room.
So I'll just mention something that I have a question about, that maybe, Ruth, you can take this one. Fire is something that is really tricky to cut. When I was younger and first was given some assignments involving fire, the larger I would make it, the more it would just become white noise. And then the smaller you would make it, the more it's just little tick-ticks come through. But the fire in this show, and there is so much fire, it goes from single candles to whole, giant circles of candles to people carrying handheld torches, all the way, obviously, up to dragons breathing fire and lighting dozens of people on fire. Do you have any tricks for doing fire? How do you approach fire, Ruth?
We talked a lot about the fire in different spaces. Westeros is quite posh, so the wood's all nicely dried. It's not very crackly, whereas in Driftmark in series 1 and then Dragonstone in series 2, it's all quite damp, so you've got lots of crackly and pop-ins. So I think the fire's quite varied just from place to place.
We try to make it different everywhere. Sometimes there was a couple of rooms where I would try not to lay an air atmosphere and just use a fire with a reverb.
Oh, cool.
Which would just give you that sense of, I only did it in a couple of rooms, but you suddenly, I'd be playing with a fire and put it into a reverb, and then go, well, that's actually giving me a feeling of air anyway.
I was always very keen to play all that stuff up. Often there's so little else going on that it's just incredibly helpful having that kind of thing to sit what are quite noisy dialogues into. So it really saved my bacon quite frequently.
It's nicer because I never felt like they got in the way. We'd be mixing and I would kind of just be watching it because I love it. And the fire would never get in the way of anything. It just sits.
The textures and the atmospheres inside and outside are always very rich. It's not a show that you come in with your establishing shot and have a lot of sound, and then once the dialogue starts, you dip under, which is a very natural thing to do for TV shows. We never did that. There was you'll never see a VCA coming down after 10 seconds as they talk. We might tuck under and kind of move between buses of different atmospheres. But it was always very textured. And even in the silence, there was always stuff going on, especially in Dragonstone. The painted table room was always, you will always hear rumbles and cracks and the wind and the sound, and there is a kind of a whale sound in there. The windows in the painted room, the painted table room, to me it looked like a whistle.
Oh, okay.
Big stripes down the side, and it's a horribly gusty place, and they're out on a rocky outcrop. So I kind of treated the whale that the showrunner wanted, the belly of the whale, I always felt was this wind passing over those, and was just a very, very, very low-pitched whistle. That was what gave you that low tonal feeling up here, and that would be pushed up in the room. We'd push that up with the ambience, up into the Atmos speakers, up onto the ceiling a bit. I try to separate out for the people that have got Atmos, their experience. Hopefully they would have heard that sometimes I put things flat on the ceiling because that's where it was. There's a lot of chandeliers in the throne room. It's amazing, beautiful, which I'm going to get one of those at some point. No idea where I'm going to put it. But the chandeliers on the ceiling had a very specific look about them. I would have some fires, which was, I think, a chemical fire sound, which would just be flat on the ceiling. Mixed down 5.1, 7.1, stereo, mono, whatever you're listening to it on. But if you're in Atmos, you can solo those. You would have just heard that flicker up there. Back to the fire again. I really enjoyed doing those because it was one of those textures which is always in the room and you can use to give a sense of your location. We felt there was 3 locations and we tried to separate them with all of the atmospheres, not just the fire.
On the various animated series I work on, we get the finished picture delivery a day before the final playback with clients. For a long time, I would put up the new picture and then all of the premix audio, and I would watch it through really closely, like a hawk, to see if anything had changed. Inevitably, every now and again, I would miss something in the background that's moved by 7 frames or a character's mouth that is now closed. And then when we were doing the playback, the director would have to stop and point out a fix. It's not an ideal way of working. Now I use Matchbox Change Management tool from the Cargo Cult to quickly run a comparison between the 2 versions of the picture, and Matchbox will notice everything that is different and flag all the changes for me. This not only saves me time, it saves the whole crew time as everything is all ready to go and allows for fewer notes during playback. It also reduces my stress significantly as my confidence is high that I have a mix fully ready to play for the clients. And that's just a small portion of what Matchbox can do, especially now that Matchbox 2 is out. Its new intelligent image matching is particularly amazing. It can match shots even if they have had significant visual changes, like the entire backgrounds replaced or extreme color grading. On the other end of the scale, the new diffing mode can detect differences down to the change of a single pixel. Using the follow DAW mode, you can see both versions of picture rolling in real time, easily showing you what has changed. Reconforming in Pro Tools with Matchbox 2 is now much faster and more reliable. The Smart Conform mode performs the reconform on a clip-by-clip basis, maintaining head and tail fades, leaving less of a cleanup job for the editor. The Cargo Cult's Matchbox 2 reveals the differences, reports on the damage, and then retimes your sound mix, saving you incalculable amounts of time. There are too many additions and improvements with Matchbox 2 for me to even mention here, so head over to thecargocult.nz or go to the link in the episode description in your player app to learn more about Matchbox 2 and pull down the free 15-day trial. Matchbox 2 is exactly what you've been waiting for. Spend your time being creative and let Matchbox handle the conforming. We've been talking about Dragonstone, but we haven't talked about the room where she goes to kind of think and read that has all the scrolls.
Yeah.
That one has a really interesting ambience because it's got like a sense that the dragons are nearby, which is really cool. The first time I heard it, I was like, what is it? Oh, I get it. That's amazing. And it kind of tells you where that room is in the mountain. Was that the idea right from the beginning? Because it worked really well.
We had a spreadsheet with like all of the scenes throughout the episodes and what dragons were in Dragonstone at what time. So we kind of knew like who we'd be hearing when she was in the kind of library space.
Also including when they'd been off travelling somewhere and when they came back.
Yeah, a great spreadsheet. And then Paula did a great grab bag of like different sounds for all the different dragons, kind of like just rummaging around in the cave, like settling down for the night, or those calls and just movement. And
Again, Paula is absolutely amazing at mood and feeling of dragons. And she brought that in. Again, some of it was just moves. And it was, okay, Cyrax and Caraxes are down there. Actually, they get on. So there might be a nice couple of calls. And then there could be another one. Okay, it's bigger. Okay, so we're going to hear a lot more kind of knocking of walls. And
just to be clear, I for the listeners, if they don't know what scenes we're talking about, we're not seeing the dragons at all during this. This is all just like through walls, been treated to
there's a stairway that goes down that takes you down into the dragon cave.
Yeah.
And that was the one room that we were told, Ryan, our showrunner, said, okay, I need to hear in that room alone. I want to hear just dragons doing their thing downstairs and hanging out, waiting to go out. Paula created these marvellous tracks, and they got moved a little bit, but generally, sometimes she'd give me a 5-7 minute long scene, and she just hit them just between the gaps, in the gaps, okay. And sometimes you don't know what it is, and it just feels like, okay, this sounds like a rock fall or something. Caraxes has accidentally knocked its head as it stood up or something. But yeah, that was great. Those little details, like you said, I think a lot of people would have missed it. It just felt like, because you're on Dragonstone and we have this kind of tectonic, low-endy kind of atmosphere that's always around that place.
There's some conversations that take place in that room, plot-wise, that are extremely important. That room, I loved that room. It was so cool. Back to the fire. Does Paula cut the fire from the dragons, or...
Paula would do everything physical about the dragons. So fire, wings, movement, vocal, stomachs. You think of, what's the massive one called? Vagar. Sorry. So like Vagar has internals more in one when it creeps onto the beach and it's asleep. There's a whole internal thing going on. I think Paula has described it, and you will have to check this before it goes out. She's a grumpy old lady with IBS. So,
just Vagar, we're talking about, not Paula.
Paula is amazing. But Vagar, has this whole internal thing as well. And again, this is what she was asked to do. All physical movements, so foots on the ground, wing flaps, unfurling, fire coming out the mouth.
Reins and saddles and things flapping off of Vagar. Vagar's so old that she's got all these bits attached to her.
Yeah. So there's all that. So there was always and it came in stems. She would send like multiple stems. Each dragon, especially in episode 4, if you've seen the huge sky battle. So each dragon we got would have vocals, movement, wings, saddle. So would be split multiple times.
When you got all these tracks, obviously the sounds that she picked would play a role in this, but mixing the fire, these huge fire bursts, making it feel alive and moving. How did that work on this mix stage?
To be honest, I just play what she gives me because it's so good. She gets it. I think on the fire a couple of times I would find a low end or something just to kind of push through. But that's more kind of you felt in the mix because she hadn't really heard it with Ramin's music. So we'd make adjustments as you do in the mix. But generally, I think that the one thing that I changed, and she'll hate me for this, but she knows that I was doing, because she'd always hear it and go, why did you do that? Was the reins, because it's quite rattly and it would just cut through too much. I'd never ask her to change anything. I'd never go back and you need to do this. I knew what I was getting was great. But yeah, the fire... EQing, just pushing EQs every now and then would usually go. There's a couple of times when you fly through fire bursts and stuff like that. And I always feel that the crackle is the thing that's going to sell that to me. Flying through a thing, kind of woof, big woof, kind of fireball in front of you for the audience to feel like it's pulling at your skin and tearing at your clothes. It's that high frequency crackle that suddenly makes you feel like you're in the fire. So I may have added that a few times. But generally, EQing, bit of compression every now and then to get some detail out. But I rarely touch Paula's stuff. It just comes in and it just works.
Amazing. So the third kind of main location in season 2 that we haven't talked about yet is Harrenhal, which is a disaster. It's all these other castles are well maintained. Harrenhal is falling apart, and it feels like it must be raining 24 hours a day when you're inside, at least. because there's just drips, it's damp. Do you want to talk about making the audience feel that, I don't know if decay is the right word?
It's just rain, 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 rain. So much rain.
There's a lot of subjective stuff in Harrenhal, isn't it? Especially when Damon first gets there. There was quite a fine line to be trod between what's literally happening as he's kind of stalking through. He's not quite sure where anybody is, comes across a guard. But then also we were selling this idea, he's hearing different things off in the distance. So it's not necessarily there. A lot of it is his kind of descent into a weird subjective state. So we spent quite a lot of time, didn't we, going through and picking out things and making them more and less obvious, whether they were real or whether they were subjective. So that was an interesting challenge in Harrenhal.
Yes, using the decay of the building, especially that first entrance. He comes down the stairs and goes through, and it was a rockfall shot where he comes through and looks into the main chamber, and the rain is applause because it's a memory of the parties that used to be there. So, and we had cheering and stuff, but you're not quite sure. That was a really interesting scene to do. We've all sat in mixes where what I wanted and what the showrunner wanted weren't the same. And I fought on that one probably more than anything else in that whole season, in season 2. I really wanted it to be not hammer horror. Ryan Condell, the showrunner, was very much, it cannot be hammer horror. I don't want lightning crashes and flashes like the sound editor's constant conversation of, is the lightning in sync with the thunder? And we had a long conversation about that. And we worked out a period of time, he starts here, and by the time he gets there for that shot, it's in sync. But the storm is coming in. So when he's here, we're a couple of seconds out. Flash of lightning, 2 seconds later, the thunder. And as he moves through, it got tighter and tighter up until the very last shot before there's a cut and he's sitting down having dinner, where it's in sync. So that was an interesting thing. And again, I think the audience, when they're watching those kind of things, as soon as they go, okay, we're out of sync, there will always be people who go, hang on a minute, that's not in sync. But most people will go, okay, that's the path you've chosen to take. Okay, I can, and hopefully they very quickly go, fine, I get that. But yeah, the rain at the beginning, and again, it was another me and Ryan conversation where I wanted to feel all these rains, and every time he came in, he was like, no, down a bit, down a bit, down a bit, down a bit. So, and it absolutely sounded great at the end, and I know why he did it. He wanted to feel Damon had removed himself from this situation. He wasn't really singing, and it was these strange noises, and what was that, and a bit of metal, and then you come around the corner and there's a guard, and he punches the guard in the face. And so everything had to be based in reality. We didn't make any weird noises. We weren't designing anything strange to put in his head. It was all very natural sounds. It was just 4 rooms away in a castle that the verb flipped it around and made it sound like it was a bit strange, but everything was real. And I think that's the case all the way through, and unless you were actually in his head where there was sort of strange pull focuses and people appearing. But even then, we didn't really do that kind of design. We tried to stay as naturalistic as possible. Yeah. The images were doing it for Damon. He was having a tough old time.
Well, Harrenhal made me cold when I'm watching it. Like, it just felt like there was no comfort anywhere there. Obviously, the images played a role in that, but I think the sound is what put that idea in your head more than anything, because it was just so uncomfortable looking. Because as you said, there's always water dripping. I didn't think about it until you just mentioned it, but you're right. It's like the fire is over at these buildings and this is all about water.
Yeah, as we've said, the fire in Harrenhal was super crackly. That first time you go in and he sits down with Sir Simon, the fire in there is always super crackly, especially when you'd see it, especially if you pan past. There's a shot where the witch comes in and she walks past. Whenever you felt that you could, I would make it super crackly. As we've said, the difference between the 3 locations, so Harrenhal, Dragonstone and King's Landing, very much, for me, was very much trying to put a big marker on each one that they sounded completely different. There was no animals at Harrenhal.
Oh, okay.
It was a dead place. It was a horrible place. No
goat.
Yeah. There was a goat at one point.
There is. A strange
Who is the goat?
Yeah, exactly.
Who is the goat? That's the question. Who is the goat?
I want to throw out a big thanks to the motion picture sound editors for sponsoring this series on the sound community in London. MPSE is a great organization that I've been a part of for the last 7 years, and I've really enjoyed the advantages of being a member. Perks include the quarterly magazine called Wavelength that is exclusively about sound editorial and the people breaking new ground in the field. There are also the many live events put on by MPSE, including sponsoring past Tonebenders meetups in London, Toronto, and LA, and obviously the Golden Reel Awards Gala. Another big advantage is by being a member, you vote for the nominees and winners at the Golden Reels, which means you get access codes to just about every movie and series that comes out during the year. To become an active or international member of MPSE, you must have 3 years or more professional experience as a sound editor or sound designer. This can be for editing dialogue, ADR, sound effects, Foley, or music in film, television, or the gaming industries. But remember, even if you're just starting out, you can join as an associate member and get most of the perks and then be upgraded once you meet the qualifications. For full info, go to mpse.org and click on Membership. If you have any questions about becoming a member, feel free to reach out to me via info@tonebenderspodcast.com or talk to the MPSE itself.
Now, Barnaby said we go back talking about this, to segue in like it was always here. Is talking about the spaces. I'm a massive fan of Foley in general.
We haven't talked about any of the humongous scenes yet. But there's another kind of quiet scene that I want to talk about that maybe, Barnaby, you would have played a role in. After the king comes back wounded, he's being attended to by all of the various medical, I put in quotes. Seems to be medicinal lettuce being used.
Yeah, that's fun.
How did you go about that?
It reminded me of the Korean dishes you can have with hot plates and stuff in it. Yeah, but we got a load of letters and we were soaking them overnight. They were remarkably unabsorbent, actually. So we had to use, once again, we had to use our sort of imagination in, various chamois leathers and wet pieces, objects and stuff. But lettuces were in there, and it's, getting that moist contact and the goo and the pus and the wounds and stuff. I mean, that's kind of Foley heaven, really. That's
Yeah, in those types of scenes, the visuals obviously make a point, but it's the sound that makes you like get the shivers and be like, oh,
the vision goes so far, doesn't it? The visuals, and then the sound
pushes it over the top. Yeah, exactly.
Or it goes too far out of where the director loves it. He goes, that's just too horrendous. We can't use that. Yeah, it was great fun scene, but also the little intricate pots and lids and trays, and a tray going. It might be in sort of the foreground, then it goes off, and then we do a nice off mic, a down, or something that sort of completes its journey. So, it's not just in vision stuff. So those scenes can take hours.
Yeah, there was lovely little, felt the little brass kind of instruments and stuff like that. It was those little details.
And it's got to be the right kind of metal. It can't be, you can hear a sort of modern metal. So we've got lots of antique pots and trays and lids and stuff, so you get those out and audition a few, and if it's got the right sort of feel and sort of earthy and rootsy enough, you know what I mean? So it's great fun on stuff.
Did you have those kind of
I've got a warehouse full of them. Yeah, my studio is like a studio in a warehouse, and the warehouse is full of all the props. So we've just got shelves of glass and sort of modern glass, old glass, modern cups, old cups, different periods, so it's whatever you need. And that grows over time, But House of the Dragon's great for that, because it's the older stuff. I think I just like doing that older, decaying kind of programme. It's such a more interesting setting for Foley. And House of the Dragon is just, it's that in spades, really. It's brilliant.
The textures that Barnaby and the guys there bring to it, everything is not just a one hit. It's not. The time they take over it, you feel there is something more to it, from the footsteps and the movements to the jugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nothing's just like, okay, it's cut down, okay.
You get inspired by it, so beautifully shot, and you really believe it. I work on quite a lot of things and you don't buy it, But everything about that world you buy, down to the walls and the clothes and the whatever they're picking up. So,
we owe it to sort of take the time to make it sound, right.
For sure. So we were just talking about the dampness of Harrenhal.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you go about that with the footsteps?
Well, I mean, we'll do a pass of feet on various surfaces, and we always leave the wet because you can sort of ruin a surface if you wet it. So you just I remember the Damon coming into Harrenhal, we got cobbles, which is lovely uneven surface. So that was great, but you just got to pile loads of water in and add bits of sort of mud and grit and get the sort of dynamic just right between not making it too clicky and making it puddly enough. And quite often you have to do a track of puddles separately because you'll walk and it won't be sort of a deep splosh enough because Damon's foot might come right past and there's a close-up of a foot going through. So you might get a foot on the stone, but then you need to add a puddle. So, Doug's got something to mix a sort of the water element and just to give it, the elements are sort of controllable. And that was also took ages because it's his movement, his feet, the water, his armour, various armour tracks and water landing on the armour and, every scene, the acoustic's slightly different. So, we're changing the mic angle, we're changing the way the water, how much of the water you want. If there's a distant shot, maybe you're just raining back on the water. You don't want it too top-endy and, splatty, whereas you can get away with that if it's full screen and, so all these things to consider.
I think the armour as well is a huge thing for what the Foley guys bring. There's always somebody in the scene, whether it be Sir Kristen or Damon.
And they've all got different armour.
Everybody's got. They've all got armour on, and it could very easily, in a heartbeat, be too top-endy, too clicky, too rattly.
Pots and pans.
Yeah, and you just immediately you just go, okay, well, I can't use that. Yeah. And I think that there's nothing that Barnaby would deliver to me that I would go, I can't use it. I always know it's going to be in the range, and I think the armour is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
That there was always a separate armour track. There was a moves track and a foots track, but there's always an armour track as well. And it would never just get muted, even if it's sort of Sir Kristen walking out of the council chamber. Just a bit of movement. You just felt these plates moving together without it feeling, like you say, like a bunch of pots and pans.
Yeah, and they'd always quite often shoot it, wouldn't they? And Christian would come past the camera, so you'd have that opportunity to just sort of push the armour, because you don't want armour clattering around the whole time.
No, but I don't believe you never supplied anything which was clattering.
No. But
it was always a nice texture. We always felt like there was militarised.
Yeah.
But it never got in the way.
And Damon's armour is this beautiful...
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that the armour tells a story of the station of each person that's wearing armour.
Yeah.
So the lower they are in the class chain, I'm not sure exactly how to word that, the different their armour would sound. And obviously Christian being the head of the White Cloaks, his armour's got to be the most regal, or maybe Damon's is.
Well, no, I think Damon's is, and it's most dragon-like in its scale. So we'd, like when he was walking in, I think we did a pass, and he was like, yeah, it's sort of nice, it's heavy, and it's not too soft in a way, but not too sharp. But it didn't have the scaly element, so we added another track of, so if you moved his arm, you'd get this sense of lots of little bits of armour moving, and so it wasn't just a plate armour, it's plate armour with these little scaly appendages and stuff. So
I would say like an armadillo thing where you see everything lapping over.
Yeah.
And I can hear it in my head, which is not clattering together, but there's a ripple effect to it.
Hard to get those things. Quite often over the years you realise that one take generally doesn't do those things. You've got to layer up the sounds and which complement each other. And I'm sure his armour wouldn't have sounded as you'd wished it. It would be disappointing. Reality is disappointing, in my experience.
All the animals, we didn't talk about horses. Horses are always really hard because actual horses in real life hardly ever make a sound. But horses on TV shows and films that don't make sounds are kind of boring. But obviously they make sounds while they walk around and stuff like that. But Ruth, I think that you handle a lot of the horses. Do you want to talk about your approach to horses?
I kind of started everything with a natural horse sound, like all the running. The first element was like not Foley, it was actual horse recording. And then I was really careful to get like it all in sync. My session had just hundreds of markers for feet. And so once I kind of got that sense, then I could add like more punchy layers and think about the surface it was on. I used envy a lot to try and... I really struggled with grass, actually. I couldn't find any good like grass recordings. So trying to find, kind of more that kind of thing.
The sort of surface texture.
Yeah, and then using envy, get different colours in that. And then
So what were you using envy for? Like, what were you merging?
I think I put like a thunder. I was just trying to get punchy low end. Use like thunder, anything kind of bassy I could get, and then like lots of like rustle tracks of like grass moving and leaves and stuff. And then I think the great thing about using like actual horse recordings was lots of them are like up and past, so you've got like a nice natural kind of like shape to it that then you can like follow with. Yeah, there's some nice ones of Kristen's horse where it's just like a foot and all the turf is kind of spraying up behind him, so that's a really nice opportunity to add lots of little...
Envy's really good at that.
Yeah.
So you can put a tail on. Once you've hit something, you can have the tail, so if there's a debris track or stuff like that. I was always sort of... I like a messy track in there as well. Ruth absolutely did this, but having all those so perfectly synced, everything's working. But then I always felt, and I think it's usually comes from sort of saddle and not bridle so much, which always ends up cutting through too much. But something just a bit dirty about it, especially when they're out and being chased by the dragon and into the forest and bits like that. I think they're the tricky ones and the ones that Ruth did really well. So
I think it was a nice track though, of like some horse breaths, and you could feel the movement of it, but you weren't getting like saddle and bridle, and it was kind of just like the sense of the horse kind of like exerting itself, and it always sat like quite low, but I feel like it glued everything together.
Yeah, one of the early things with Ryan Condell, the showrunner in season 2, a slight mantra that we ended up with, which was no whooshes. I don't want design just for the sake of design. I don't want you to use design kind of and those kind of big sort of hits and stuff like that, big cinematic hits, which we all have libraries of. He wanted everything to be natural. Everything came from a proper recording or something that we put together. So we had to work quite hard with that, because sometimes you use these big hits and these big cinematic kind of libraries to give you that dramatic moment. And we weren't allowed to use that. So if we heard one, there was a few times that, no, okay, get rid of that. So it was...
So you still tried to sneak a couple by him?
There was a couple. Of course, yeah. Make sure he's awake. Yeah. But we didn't, it was, so that's interesting. And I like that. I like just totally natural things. Again, we're using envy and stuff like that, but we're using real sounds to beef up and to make these moments more dramatic. I cannot talk for Paula. What Paula does with her dragons is a dark art, but a fantastic dark art. But again, very naturalistic way, wings flap, and was it season 1? It was described by Miguel as when a dragon goes past, I want to feel like you're standing there in a B-52 or a 747 who's just flown past you. Silently, it's that I want to feel the weight and the size of this thing that has gone past you, not the thing itself, but just how your body would feel if something of that size went past you, that big push. Give me that. And it's like, okay, we will go off and attempt to do that. Oh, yeah.
So mostly with like winds and such?
Yeah. I think there's bass pushes and bits like that, but that was how he wanted it. Not a big kind of big over the top cinematic whoosh. He wanted the feel of it rather than the sound of it.
So did Foley tackle horses?
I think when they were sort of standing there, sort of a bit of a mooch or the odd bit of bridle sort of tossing their head, but I think generally you guys had it covered. We'd add, I think sometimes Christian horse had a bit of armour, very layered armour, sort of dress armour for a battle in episode 4. But generally, if it's just sort of a gallop, it was covered, but we were asked to do little specifics.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because Tone Benders did an episode all about doing sound design for horses recently. The classic thing that people outside our industry, when they think of Foley, they're like, oh, the coconuts. That's how they do the horse.
Yeah, no, I heard Gary Hecker talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Gary Hecker's his double coconut.
But some of the people on that episode said, I think exactly what you all are doing. The horses weren't fully, that you're using real recordings of horses.
Well, field recordings have become so much more efficient and better and cheaper and smaller. And more doable. I think a real horse, as nice as I think my Foley horses can be, I think horse recordings are just some of the most beautiful things you can listen to. I just love them, like a real saddle going past, or like the heft of the hoof, or even a horse. I've got this recording of a horse eating like an apple. It's just incredible because you can hear it like resonating in its skull, and it's just like the best sound.
I think in season 1 you gave us some weight, and I think it was what Ruth was saying about envy. Sometimes it's you want the feeling. The one I'm thinking of is just the weight. You want to feel like this thing is hitting the ground.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to record because you can't track a horse as it's going along. So I think you gave us how...
It's very wide, isn't it? Like a recording of a horse is quite wide.
It's that thud, that the sense of this very heavy beast putting its foot down.
Point of contact.
And hitting, not so much the texture, but that thud.
The impact.
Yeah, the impact, and suddenly, and then we can use that, especially with MV, to add extra bits to it. It gives you that transient to work off of. So
I think, field recordings are like that because I do a lot of like footsteps in real locations, like outside, inside and stuff, and you get this lovely acoustic and wideness, but the studio is great for getting that, that very direct, exact sound that you want, point of contact, or that's not wide, it's very focused, laser focused. And if you marry that with a wider, beefy heft of a recording, then, it's a sort of good marriage.
I think that's what Foley that Barnaby and the guys do as well is so great, because we play everything up, because there's strong atmospheres, and because we have these huge rooms to play with. We never shy away from pushing the Foley. It's always great. I know what they're going to supply works as a texture, whether it be the footsteps or the moves. So especially with the footsteps walking in, there's always dramatic entrances into these rooms, or there's someone's always steaming in or having a fit and steaming out. And using that as part of it, down to the Queen kind of creeping round the table and talking to her sons and stuff like that, and using that and being able to just prominently play the Foley with a good reverb that would always give me the lead on where we were going. And it is the texture that they bring to their Foley, that it isn't just heel-toe, 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 or some cases, foot. There was always something about, and I know Barnaby's the artist as well, so I worry for his knees and his hips, because obviously he's not just walking, because there is so much movement.
I've got size 10 heels.
But that movement and the texture you get to each footstep, whether it be on a stone surface or a crunchy surface or outside or inside, feels more than just a step. There is a range of textures within just one person walking that gives you that totally naturalistic thing, which means you can play it up and you don't feel like you're having to hide it away, that we've all had to do with Foley at some point, and kind of like, okay, well, I can't really go there. We always made sure we were up front and pushing it. So.
And did that affect the way that you were working on it, knowing that like there was space it was going to get heard? Because we all know that sometimes Foley, it's beautiful sounding and it plays, but then the music comes in and just crushes it.
We always shoot in context, so we're listening to music and guide, and we'd never record in isolation, because you can sort of kid yourself that it's working, and as soon as you put an orchestral score up, an orchestral score will probably kill most things, but you've just got to choose your moments, and I know Doug's going to mix the music around it, and that's just how the director wants the music, and that's how it is. But you've got to assume that it's all going to be heard and it's all going to be spot on, and not become too upset when it's not heard.
I do try and push it as much as possible.
I used to get very upset when I first started, and I've been doing it a long time now. So
I feel that they want a very naturalistic soundtrack for these things, and I think the Foley is something for me. I'm always pushing Foley. I'll always push for Foley. I always make a point of it in spotting sessions and stuff like that. This is part, if you want it to feel real, if you want to feel like you're involved, and it is the texture of the jug going down. It is the texture of the cape swoosh and the armour and those kind of things. And I think I always feel I watch some shows and there's two people walking down the street and there's nothing. Just draws me out of it slightly. I think a bit more time spent on Foley, especially for this show, is pays great dividends for us.
It's the ultimate compliment that when I watch a show that I've worked on, normally it's quite a few months afterwards. So you need a bit of separation, decompress, and I can hear all the Foley. That's the biggest compliment to me, because obviously they liked it and it was working.
Let's talk about a few specific scenes in season 2. The Battle of Rook's Rest. I think we're going to maybe leave the dragon parts to Paula. What I would like to talk about is how it's utter chaos. There's armies fighting each other. There's dragons battling above us. But there are a bunch of moments in that where we kind of go into Christian Cole's POV. The sound changes at that point. Maybe we can talk about how that all came together.
Are you talking about when he falls off a horse, hits his head and is on the ground?
That's part of it for sure, yeah.
We both did different passes on different bits, and then I think you kind of glued stuff together. I think the biggest thing in that whole bit, though, was how we got out of like the carnage and then him falling off and hitting his head. And we wanted that moment, the audience, to think like, is he dead? The weight of that third had to feel quite final, I think.
We kept it because it goes on for quite a long time before he climbs the hill up to where the dragons landed, where the king's in the carcass. We tried it one way where we come out of, as soon as Sir Christian Cole comes around and stands up, we're back in reality and you're hearing the devastation. And a lot of crowd was shot for people dying on the field and all these kind of things. But I felt it worked better. So we ended up going down a path where you don't really ever come out of that moment. And it worked much better. Once he's hit his head, we never come back. And even when he's walking through, he knocks over armour and there's charred remains inside. And so even through there and beyond, I think the only time you hear it is on the last walk up. There's a side shot as he's walking up the hill and there's a horse there and you hear a couple of dying people there. Because of the mayhem you just witnessed and the amount of noise that was going on, it was quite nice. We didn't need to remind everybody that there was dead bodies. There was carnage everywhere. We wanted to stay with Sir Christian, not coming back into reality and just following his footsteps up to the forest, up into the clearing was a much better way of dealing with that scene, and not something I think Ryan expected, but was on board and I think worked quite well.
The quiet helped us get back within our loudness specs as well.
That's always a struggle.
By that stage.
Yeah, then episodes 4 and 7, yeah, we're slight existential crisis trying to deal with the loudness levels of trying to get it back in spec. We mix, we're aware of the spec, but we don't really try and focus on it while we're doing it. We try and make it sound as good as we can at whatever levels we think are right. And then we check over our shoulder and go, damn it. Okay, what can we lose? And a couple of times, yeah, we do take artistic license to go, I think a quiet moment here would do us the world of good. just to give ourselves like 0.1 back to try and dip under the spec that we need to get into. So,
and how do you deal with Foley on these like massive scenes of armies battling each other and such?
They can often be a bit of a godsend, actually, because quiet scenes is like our sort of, symphony of Foley. And then these scenes, I mean, there was a lot. There was people running and falling, getting hit by arrows. People had armour, some people had leather, so the different armies, so we're differentiated between those. You're just sort of picking out what you see, really. It was some cloaks flapping, get a sense of wind and movement and saddle grabs and stuff. But, we'd do it thinking, well, there's a lot going on. These, they're useful, but they might not be used. And, we're just picking out things that we think would audibly be useful.
It was an interesting thing to do because you were either in a huge battle on the ground or in the air. Didn't really join the two. I know they come down to the ground, but we very much had them as separate locations. Yeah. So it was like you were cutting from one to the other. Mm-hmm. I was saying about Paula just doing the dragon stuff. Barnaby and the guys would do, if someone's on and someone's flying a dragon, then there'd always be cloak flap. So Paula wouldn't do that. That would be a Foley thing.
Or if they got armour, then they do a big enough body movement, then we'll cover it. But if it's just like a sort of tiny head turn or something, then, you sort of choose your moments where it's going to be useful.
That was a definite scene where we did have quite a bit of design going through and again, only at that point where Sir Christian hits the ground. Before that, it's all very naturalistic and it's all as close as we could get to being in the moment. And then when he hits his head and he's coming to, that was quite a lot of design around there with the flames flickering. You're not quite sure if he's possibly dead. And then, the classic huge breath in. And at this point, I don't think people really like Sir Christian. So they were like,
Well, it's one of the great things about the Game of Thrones franchise, if you will, is that anyone can die at any point. The vast majority of series, when someone's a main character and they get hurt, you're just like, he's going to be fine. But in this series, you're like,
Probably dead.
Yeah. The Red Wedding, I think it was called, episode in the original series just changed everything on who you think is going to survive anything.
Yeah.
Let's discuss when the dragons pick their riders. The second to last episode, I believe, is that 7?
Yeah, in 7 when they all go out
so
to the Dragon Cave.
It's an amazing scene. It doesn't happen very often anymore in the world that we live in where the next day everyone's talking about something. Everywhere I went for the next couple days after that aired, people were talking about, did you see it? Did you see it? It was amazing. No, don't tell me I haven't seen it yet. Don't talk about it. It was kind of a cultural moment because it was an amazing, amazing scene. And obviously the dragons played a big role in it, but everything played a role in it. It was super intense. And as we just spoke, anyone can die at any moment, and many people do die. And then also the people who end up becoming the 2 riders, the way they become the riders tells so much about their character. One becomes a rider because of his bravery, stands up to save someone. One becomes a rider because of his cowardice. He runs away and hides, and then the dragon, for some reason, picks him, who is a horrible human being. Season 3, we will all be cheering against.
Yeah.
But can we just talk about that scene and how it came together? Because there's obviously tons going on in that scene.
Fascinating working with, because of visual effects department, when we're mixing visual effects, obviously are coming in quite late in the game, as for us sometimes, especially for Paula, because she does do so much of her work is small articulations and movements and jaws opening and things like this. So it was really interesting to have those quiet moments, and there was a lot of moving of what she'd done as the dragons come out of the darkness. That first shot as Vermithor comes out of the darkness, we must have moved little dragon sounds and footsteps, and a wing knocks some rocks and they fall down, and what's that? And building that tension with less. This is always
it's all darkness, basically.
Yeah. So having those moments of, you want everybody to be holding their breath. What am I going to see? Is it going to fly out? Is it going to attack immediately? I have no idea. And I think the surprise of the fire burst that is, it works really well as well. An amazing sequence. When we started it, I was told, episode 4, episode 7, there's 2 battles. And then as the picture comes to me, it's like, okay, there's Rook's Rest in 4, that's a definite battle. And I was like, where's the battle in 7? It's a monumental scene for sound, for Paula. There's actually not a huge amount of music.
Yes.
In season 1, they didn't want a lot of music. In season 2, one episode where there's 29 minutes, and in that 29 minutes, there's only 30 seconds of music. Doesn't happen in high-end TV. For us sound people, it's brilliant. We know we're going to be up front. We can't hide. There's no getting away with it. We need to make sure we're on our A game constantly. It was lovely to have that scene. And again, it was a lot of peaceful. We've been in that space before. It's the tectonic. It's that big, bassy atmosphere. Again, lots of flames, not only from the dragon, but things get set on fire. People walk past with flames. There's a tree on fire. He turns around and there's a torch next to him. And Martin Cantwell is one of our effects editors as well, also did a lot of the firework there. He's got some amazing recordings that he used for moving around and Doppler as people are moving past with lovely flame sounds. And the crowd, despite the fact that they don't all survive, selling the space again. There's some people running around in the background and jumping and diving and stuff like that. So that was a tricky one for Verb, because it could all very quickly, with a big verb, just disappear and
turn into mush.
Yeah, sound like the far end of a cathedral, which is not what you want. You always want to feel like you're present with all of these characters. So
for me in that scene, a lot of it was about maintaining connections with the characters. So when Hugh's running through the dragon pit and all of that, and he's going to save the woman who's about to get torched, just making sure we kept in touch with his breaths and with all the physical movement and all that stuff. So it felt like you were right there with him to give you a bit more of a sense of danger when he shouts, "Come on," at the dragon just before they bond, just to try to get the absolute maximum level of that without clipping. It should feel like a gigantic moment. You know, you've got this small guy against this gigantic dragon. So to try to get his voice to match the scale of the dragon was, something I worked a fair bit on.
So when Ulf has this second connection with the dragon, he steps on a pile of eggs, and that's a pretty gross sound that you put in there. What was that, Foley or sound effects or a bit of both?
Yeah, we did some egg cracking, sort of shells, get sort of a caving in sound, breaking sound. Wanted to got these clay pots and sort of let them dry and then sort of pop them, get that popping sound. with the sort of alien sort of goo inside.
We had that in season 1 as well. Damon had gone into the cave and he'd cracked one to put it in a bag and steal the egg.
Yeah, you need to break that down into sort of moisture layers, goo, moisture, and then dry outer shell, sort of crisps. That's another example of layering up sounds. It's not just a sort of one-take wonder, but can take a long time to get all the textures right. That's too wet, that's too dry. Get them married together.
She's quite forgiving of the intrusion, I think, isn't she? She doesn't mind stepping practically on her babies.
Yeah. But that's, again, another Paula moment. As the dragon head comes over and goes to what you think is going to kill Ulf, it glances very quickly at the eggs. It's like, my babies. I think Paula did 2 versions of that. The first one was great, and Ryan was like, okay, let's try something else. And it's just a subtle moment, and you would miss it in passing. But as the dragon's head just looks down, just checks on the eggs as it's going for Ulf, there's a little sound that Paula's put in for a motherly kind of like, just checking on your babies, before it goes in and
Ragdolls them a little bit.
Yeah. Breathes heavily over Ulf. It's those tiny little dragon detail that I think.
Character.
She really does do the character really well for all the different dragons, and they all do sound so wildly different. So.
The last thing that we'll talk about is the blood and cheese sequence where they break into the castle to avenge the death of the other child that ends season 1. Do you want to talk about how you killed that poor child?
That kept changing for a while, didn't it? We tried so many different things.
It was a good mixture.
Yeah.
I think what sold it was Ryan, our showrunner. He said it's a knife. It's a blunt, rusty knife, which I'd asked Foley to do. So there's a lot of elements in there. And I think there's a couple of squeaks of a knife kind of on bone. So it's not cutting through because there's no serration there. And then it suddenly starts cutting through. We tried various vocals for the child. It actually ends up being Ruth. She is a small child being murdered. I don't think I told anybody the first time round. I still don't quite know how she got herself in the headspace of a child that's kind of, oh my God, something's happening. Oh my God, there's a knife. Oh my God, they're going to kill me. Her vocal is in there and absolutely sells it, this rising panic for this small child. I've had more comments about that scene than anything else. Oh, it was horrific. Oh, it was awful. It's a great one for sound. You don't see anything.
Yeah.
And it's marvellous that we managed to do that. And there's a lot of little moments that make people go, oh, and then a couple of seconds later, oh no, oh no, please don't do that. And I think it was a good marriage of all of the things that we brought together, all the Foley and the vocals that Ruth did. I don't think we could have got a small child in to do that. I think Ruth you're a good 4 or 5 characters in the whole show. She's a lady of many talents. Can put her vocal skills to various things.
Yeah, just get random calls from Al. He was like, I need XYZ. And it's like, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I need it. Like, okay.
Yeah. Send it back. Don't tell the neighbours it's going to be a very loud day. But yeah, that was a nice one. And that whole sequence as well, from them moving through the castle, from the moment they step in. And again, there's barely any music, and the music only really comes up on just as that escape happens. Ryan was very keen to make it feel like they were trying to creep through the castle, but everything they did was not creeping through the castle. The box.
They were noisy, weren't they?
Yeah, with the box of the rat traps that they had over the thing, which the Foley guys did amazing. You feel all these little kind of weird metal and wood knocks and their feet, and they're in these cavernous spaces. So again, Foley doing the footsteps. So it felt, and they're in the big hall, and then they're in a small stairway. It was a great one to play with for sound because of all these different spaces, and the fact that they're trying to be quiet and failing abysmally.
Yeah, it was cut really beautifully, wasn't it? With sort of perspectives and acoustics and always changing. It was great.
And his little dog.
Yes, the little dog. Yeah.
Attached to the little dog. I was doing all the little sounds for him, and I kind of felt his journey the whole way through, and he just loves this rat catcher so much, even though he's just so horrible to him all the time.
And he boots him away, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The most offensive thing in the whole show.
Yeah, there was so much stuff online after the Blood and Cheese episode, and it was all about the dog rather than the The kid, yeah.
We did see the green screen, just for the viewers out there. We did see the green screen that he did not kick a dog. It was very clever VFX. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much for talking to me about this. Appointment viewing was something that we all grew up with. You had to watch, Cheers or whatever, Seinfeld at a certain time. It doesn't really exist anymore except for this show. It's one of the last vestiges of that idea that, oh wait, it's Sunday night, we got to go watch House of the Dragon.
Cool.
Yeah. And you knocked it out of the park. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Big thanks to Al, Barnaby, Ruth, and Doug for talking to me about their work on House of the Dragon. I also want to thank Warner Brothers Delane Lee Studios for hosting us for this talk. I'm going to throw out a mention for the motion picture sound editors for sponsoring this series of episodes featuring the interviews I did while in England. They will also be sponsoring the second annual London Tonebender Sound Design Meetup coming soon on Sunday, August 24th at the Crown and Two Chairmen in Soho. To learn more about the motion picture sound editors, you can go to mpse.org. The next episode in this series will be a deep dive into the legacy of the sound design in the James Bond films. You will not want to miss it. That's it for today. Thanks for listening to Tonebenders. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support. Thanks for listening.